The story kicks off with a view of a house surrounded by several parked cars. The scene quickly transitions inside, where we see a man moving with determination. Suddenly, he halts, anxiety washing over him as he discovers a suitcase in the house. Confused, he wonders why it's there. Next, he looks at a photograph of 3 people and decides it might be best to ask about it tomorrow. Moments later, he's standing at a door, lost in thought, when he remembers he forgot to claim his daily reward in his favorite game. As he opens the door, he reflects on how dependency can lead to a loss of self-control. Upon entering the room, his attention is drawn to a fan spinning lazily. As he surveys the room, he notices a girl sleeping peacefully. Our main character is clearly displeased with her sleeping and decides to wake her up, but first he wants to confirm if she's truly asleep, as he seems to need something from her. However, there's no response. The girl remains silent, either truly asleep or choosing not to answer him. Realizing this, he decides to put on some cool headphones and enjoy a tasty pie. At that moment, he realizes his dependency is linked to his stepmother, something he doesn't seem to hide and might even be a bit proud of. Time passes, and the sleeping stepmother begins to wake up due to the noise the main character is making. Morning arrives, and our bespectacled protagonist approaches his stepmother to ask if she slept well. She's busy preparing a delicious breakfast, smiling as she replies that she slept just fine, just like he did. Wanting to please him, she tells him she's made a traditional Korean dish for breakfast. Unexpectedly, the guy isn't thrilled. He tells his stepmother he was expecting curry instead. She gently reminds her spoiled child that he had curry yesterday, and a little variety is good for him. She assures him that the Korean dish is tasty too and encourages him to try it a moment later. They're both seated at the kitchen table eating. Suddenly, the guy with glasses notices something odd. It feels to him like his stepmother is staring at him strangely. She claims she's just curious if he likes the food. Although he listens carefully, it still feels off to him. He expresses his discomfort, saying he can't enjoy his meal with someone staring at him. In response, the girl says nothing, only continuing to look into his eyes, a slight smile forming on her lips. The guy grows tired of the awkward silence and complains that he might get indigestion from the food. We learn that our main character's late father left him with a new stepmother, Kwon Hye-soo, who is now sitting across from him. The scene shifts to show 3 cacti, each labeled with different names, and the guy comments that once everyone calmed down, they started living together. Then he recalls the day his stepmother was introduced to him, a day so significant he can't forget it. Back in his childhood, John's first impression of his stepmother wasn't great. She seemed cold and stern to him. Around the same time, Kwon Hye-soo learns John's name, and he realizes how dangerous she seemed, almost as if she might strangle him with cannonballs when he least expected it. This might have been because, despite her beauty, she had always wanted a son and wouldn't miss her chance. Suddenly, John is jolted back to reality by a loud scream, his stepmother trying to snap him out of his thoughts. Kwon Hye-soo reminds our main character that he still needs to eat all his beans and shouldn't delay. She tries to help by extending her chopsticks towards his plate, aiming to feed him a bean. When she manages to grab one, she asks him to open his mouth wider. However, John, remembering that he's capable of doing things on his own, reminds his stepmother that he's not a child anymore. But Kwon Hye-soo makes it clear she doesn't care about that. He'll always be her little child. John realizes that arguing is pointless, so he opens his mouth and eats the bean, accepting defeat. His stepmother asks him to chew well and inquires if it tastes good. To avoid offending her, he replies that it's not bad. At this moment, Kwon Hye-soo enjoys seeing how much her stepson has grown, believing it's all because of the beans. After finishing his meal, John decides to ask his stepmother something important. He's remembered the suitcase and wants to know why it was in the living room. The girl tenses up, her expression clearly showing that she's confused and trying to come up with an excuse on the fly. Kwon Hye-soo knows she won't be able to come up with a believable excuse. She understands that John is grown and independent, and she wants to say something. However, their conversation is conveniently interrupted by a notification on her phone. Realizing she's late for work, she tells John they'll talk after she returns, leaving him with no answers. First, she heads to the bathroom, reminding John to come back from college early. She enters the bathroom, and the story kicks off with a view of a house surrounded by several parked cars. The scene quickly transitions inside, where we see a man moving with determination. Suddenly, he halts, anxiety washing over him as he discovers a suitcase in the house. Confused, he wonders why it's there. Next, he looks at a photograph of 3 people and decides it might be best to ask about it tomorrow. Moments later, he's standing at a door, lost in thought, when he remembers he forgot to claim his daily reward in his favorite game. As he opens the door, he reflects on how dependency can lead to a loss of self-control. Upon entering the room, his attention is drawn to a fan spinning lazily. As he surveys the room, he notices a girl sleeping peacefully. Our main character is clearly displeased with her sleeping and decides to wake her up, but first he wants to confirm if she's truly asleep, as he seems to need something from her. However, there's no response. The girl remains silent, either truly asleep or choosing not to answer him. Realizing this, he decides to put on some cool headphones and enjoy a tasty pie. At that moment, he realizes his dependency is linked to his stepmother, something he doesn't seem to hide and might even be a bit proud of. Time passes, and the sleep swan, tired of the small talk, whispers something to John, hinting that she wants to see him later. But John, uninterested, politely excuses himself, saying he promised his mother he'd return home early. His friend is baffled, urging him to stay and tell his mother he'll be late, but John insists his mother has something important to say. As John walks away, his friend can't understand why he's so eager to leave, even considering him a mama's boy. He's shocked that John would turn down Swan and can't fathom what he's thinking on the bus ride home. John gazes out the window, lost in thought. He remembers how his stepmother promised to always be by his side until he went to college, and the thought makes him feel sad. He's haunted by the realization that they've never had, and likely never will have, such a conversation. Eventually, John reaches his house and begins to open the door, curious about what awaits him inside. As he steps inside, he's struck by how dark it is. He takes off his shoes and begins to slowly wander around, searching for Kwon Haisu. Finally, he finds the light switch and flips it on, revealing a mess that reminds him of a gamer's room. Suddenly, John remembers the suitcase from the day before and rushes to check if it's still there, but to his surprise, it's gone. He stands there, staring at the empty space, trying to make sense of it all. Worried, he tosses his bag aside and runs toward his stepmother's room, hoping to find some answers. When he reaches the door, John, full of anxiety, throws it open and calls out for his stepmother. To his relief, Kwon Haisu is there, standing and watching him as if she's been waiting for him. Seeing his distressed state, she asks what's wrong, noticing how much he's sweating. But John just silently stares at her without saying a word. He suddenly hugs her tightly, afraid that she might have left him. Kwon Haisu, surprised but touched, asks what's going on. John explains that he was worried she'd left after he couldn't find the suitcase and saw all the lights turned off. He begs her not to scare him like that again, and she promises never to leave him. John, still anxious, asks her to confirm that she won't leave him. She reassures him, and he asks if he can stay with her tonight because there are monsters in his room. Kwon Haisu is shocked by the request, but John insists. Of course, for Kwon Haisu, this was a real shock. She just couldn't wrap her head around why this guy wanted to stay with her that night. Our main character tells her that he wants to sleep in her room because he's genuinely terrified of being alone. Fast forward a bit, and we see a very satisfied guy lying on the bed, just about to drift off to sleep, mission accomplished. But then the door to his room slowly starts to open, and light spills in from the hallway. It seems like someone is about to enter. It turns out to be his stepmother, who silently approaches him to tell him something. Her actions wake him up, and he's shocked that she would rouse him in the middle of the night. It was completely unexpected. We then shift our focus back to the stepmother, who's now contemplating whether she should test something with our main character. A moment later, she lies down on the bed, and now the two of them are sleeping in the same room, ensuring that no monster will scare them tonight. Once again, we see our main character, who can't seem to fall asleep. He's just staring at the ceiling, unable to believe that Kwon Haisu actually allowed him to sleep here. Lying next to her, he starts to feel incredibly nervous, and it's making it impossible for him to drift off. Then, John decides to check if his stepmother is asleep. It appears that she has already drifted off since she isn't moving much. Realizing this, he decides to lean in and whisper something in her ear. He means to share something important that he's been keeping to himself. Our main character quietly tells the sleeping girl that he's been very worried she might disappear while he's sleeping. He also admits that he doesn't want to lose his stepmother, which is why he doesn't want to stray far from her. He understands that this might be an odd thing to say and that she might even despise him for it, but he makes it clear that whenever she's next to him, he feels these strange, overwhelming emotions, and he finds it hard to figure out what they mean. If you enjoyed this story, consider sticking around for a little longer and maybe even subscribing. I hope to see you again.